Photoshop tutorial number 2. In this tutorial, we're going to be creating a hamburger using basic tools found in Photoshop. The tools that we will be using today are the Move tool, or your arrow, the Marquee tool, and if you hold down on the Marquee tool, you will find that there are several other styles of marquee. In this case, we will be sticking to the rectangle and the elliptical marquee. We also have the Lasso tool, the Paintbrush tool, the Eraser tool, the paint bucket tool, which generally is hidden by the gradient tool. So if you're looking for the paint bucket tool and you can't seem to find it, that's because it's hiding behind the gradient. So we'll hold down on that button and find the paint bucket tool. We will also use the blur tool as well as the smudge tool to blend layers together. And we will be using the text tool to lay our name on our hamburger at the very end. Additionally, we will be using the color picker tool, in which case this first box here is your foreground color and this is your background color. If you'd like to add color to an image and you want to paint that in, you can use either your paint bucket tool or your paintbrush tool. However, it will only use this first color that's here, and you can switch back and forth between your foreground and your background color by clicking on this rotating arrow here. Let's get started. We're going to open up a brand new file. We're going to click on File and then New. We're going to title this with our last name or first name and Hamburger to follow. And we're going to change from pixels to inches, and we're going to make this 6 by 6. Now, because we're doing just a tutorial image that's strictly just using pixels in Photoshop, we're going to leave the resolution at 72, and we're going to hit OK. Now in here, we're going to start by creating a bun. Again, I'm going to go to that rectangular marquee tool. I'm going to hold down and go to the elliptical marquee tool, and I'm just going to click and create a circle. Now, as you can notice, my circle is not necessarily perfectly in the center. I'm going to move that around by clicking into the center of my marquee. Notice that there is a square marquee that appears below my mouse, and I'm going to move that around. So to create a new layer, I'm going to go over here to my layer panel, and I'm going to click on the New Layer button. And notice if you hover over any button in Photoshop, it will automatically tell you what it is you're clicking on. So we're going to create a new layer. I'm going to double click in that layer, and I'm going to write Bottom Bun. I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to change my tool to the Paint Bucket tool, and I'm going to click on this foreground color picker to change the color that I want to paint my bun. I'm going to go in here. I'm just going to find kind of a tannish orange, and I'm going to paint that in there. So this will now be my bottom bun. To unclick from your marquee, you can click anywhere outside of the marquee and it will automatically disappear. Now I'm going to create the hamburger patty, and the first thing I'm going to do is to go and create a new layer again, and I'm going to name this Burger Patty. And now I'm going to create another circle. Again, if that circle does not land exactly where you want it to, you can always move it around by clicking in the center when you see that little square that shows up. Again, I'm going to paint this in a different color. I'm going to go back to my color picker tool, and I'm going to go and find a darker browner color. I'm going to go with that there. Okay. So we're going to add that in. Now I'm still not quite liking where this is. So I'm going to click out of my marquee tool, and I'm going to grab the arrow tool. Because I'm selected on the layer, I can move the entire layer to wherever I want it to go. Now say I want to make this a bit bigger of a burger patty. I'm going to go to Edit, Free Transform. With Free Transform, I can change the size of my burger patty. Again, this is this transform tool that shows up. It has a square around the outside of it. If I want to keep the dimensions the same, I'll hold down Shift when I click and move my item, or I can let go of Shift and it will change naturally. So I'm just going to get that right in there, and I'm going to hit enter to remove that square. If I don't hit enter to remove that square, it will not allow me to click on any other layers or move on from that step. So remember to click enter to get rid of that square around your item. I'm going to click a new layer here, and in this case, I'm going to add the cheese. And to create Swiss cheese, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over here to the marquee tool, and I'm going to change this to a rectangular marquee. And now I'm going to create my slice of cheese, maybe a little bit smaller. I'm going to stick this on here, like so. Now I'm going to color that in. I'm going to change my color again using that foreground color picker. I'm going to make it a very light yellow. I'm going to paint that in. Now Swiss cheese predominantly has some missing pieces, so I'm going to switch back over to my elliptical. I'm going to click outside of that, and then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to slowly get rid of some of the cheese that's in here. Now to do this, I'm going to make one circle, and then I'm going to erase what's in there using the eraser tool, and I'm just going to click and erase. And then I'm going to go back to my marquee tool, and I'm going to move that same circle over, and I'm going to go back in and click and erase. Alternatively, instead of using the eraser tool, you may also click backspace. I'm going to move this over again, and I'm just going to click backspace this time. Again, I'm going to click outside of that marquee to remove the marquee tool from my screen here, and I'm going to create a new layer. In this layer, I'm going to create a piece of lettuce. And to do that, lettuce is an irregularly shaped item. So we're going to use the lasso tool, and I'm going to click and drag to create my piece of lettuce that I am going to have on my burger. And then I'm going to fill that in with the paint bucket tool, again going to my foreground color picker, and I'm going to change my color, and I'm going to go with piece of lettuce. Okay, so there's my lettuce. Again, clicking in any of the marquee or lasso tools, I'm going to click outside, and then I'm going to create a new layer once more. This time I'm going to add tomatoes. I create a single tomato on here. I'm going to go to my circle marquee tool, and I'm going to create a circle. And in that circle, I'm now going to paint that red. Okay, so there's my first circle. Now, this doesn't quite look like a tomato, so we're going to create some additional color we're going to add on here. We're going to use the paintbrush tool, and we're going to change that brush size down. Yeah, it's still a bit too large. Let's go with that one there. And then I'm going to make my opacity level, I'll put that down to about 20%. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to change my color. Now if I paint with the same color on top of this, it's not going to show any difference because it's the same color. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to find a lighter color because we're going to blend this together. Now on here, I'm just going to make a couple of spots. Well, it seems I need to go a little bit lighter. And maybe a little bit higher on my opacity. Okay, so I'm going to put in little bits here, here, and here. Now to blend this together, what I'm going to use the blur tool and the smudge tool. And we're going to zoom in a little bit more so that I can see this a little bit more close up. And we're going to use the blur tool to begin with. Now the blur tool is best to use on the outer edges of something to show it actually blurring. For example, if I come out here and I start blurring, you may notice that the edge of this tomato now becomes very soft. To remove this, I'm going to go into my history panel and I'm going to go back up one step to remove it. Now in here, I'm going to make my brush just a little bit bigger. And I'm going to increase the strength of my blur all the way to 100. Now these items are already fairly blurry, but I just want to blend this in just a little bit more. So I'm going to go around and I'm going to blur these colors together. Okay. Now if we look between the two states here, we can go all the way up to the first blur tool, and you'll notice it doesn't really blur too much. So we're going to come in here and we're going to use the smudge tool. Again, I'm going to make that just a bit larger on my brush size. And smudge tool is just like moving your finger through wet paint. So as you pull on items, you'll notice that they change, as if you're sticking your finger in wet paint and dragging it around. So we're able to create a slightly more realistic shape on our tomato. Okay, now I'm fairly happy with that result. I'm going to take this and I'm going to create a duplicate of this tomato by dragging my layer down to the Create New Layer button and releasing. Now that's going to create a tomato copy. In order to move this copy, I'm going to come over here to my Move tool and I'm going to drag it over. And now I'm going to make one more copy. This copy now, because I copied from the original copy, is going to come from this one here, and I'm going to move it up. Now you don't actually have to grab from the tomato that you pulled from. You can click on any layer and move it without touching it, because you're dragging the entire layer together. Here, I'm going to click on the New Group button. I'm going to rename this group Tomato. And then I'm going to click on the first layer or the last layer, and I'm going to hold down Shift before I click on the other layer at the end of where I want to grab everything. And I'm going to click and then drag these items into the tomato folder. Now, once inside this tomato folder, I can go to Edit and Free Transform and change all of these tomatoes at the same time. I'm going to hold down Shift before I click, and then I'm going to pull to make them all equally larger and click Enter when I'm done. I'm then going to move the tomatoes to where I want them to be placed based off of the fact that I'm holding on to the entire folder, and then I'm going to create a new layer above that folder. Now, if you have this folder open and you're highlighted on it and you click on the New Layer button, your new layer will appear inside that folder. To pull that layer out, you just grab it and pull until you see a line appear above it and release. I'm going to name this layer Bacon. My lasso tool to create a bacon shape. Now in this bacon shape, I'm going to go to my color picker tool once again, and I'm going to find a color that I want to make my bacon. I'm going to make my bacon just a little dark red, almost to that brown. I'm going to add my paint bucket tool and paint in. Now I want to add a little bit of variety to this, so I'm now going to use my paint brush tool, and I'm going to choose a lighter color, and I'm going to paint that onto the top of my bacon. Let's make our brush just a little bit bigger here. Check that size, a little bit larger, and that should be good. Again, I'm going to leave my opacity about 50%, and I'm going to paint over to add a little bit more color to my bacon. Okay, and then I'm going to add a third color, and it's going to be a lot lighter. And I'm going to bring that in just a few spots. And now we're going to use the smudge tool to smudge some of that all together. I'm going to be careful not to pull from the exact outer edges, or else it will pull on the edges of my bacon. And if I do that, I can always go in and pull it back out because I still have that marquee tool on. So you'll notice it's pulling as if it's a finger moving through paint to create a more blurred effect. I'm going to go out here, I'm going to click on a marquee tool and remove that. You can see I've got some edges on here. So I'm going to put my marquee tool back on by going back into my history panel and clicking on the last smudge tool. And I'm going to make sure that I pull the smudges all the way out to the edges again. Alternatively, I can also pull open my paintbrush tool again and pull this off to the side. I can choose a color from my document by clicking anywhere where I want color to come from. Now I can also click outside of that marquee tool and get a color that's not within the layer that I'm currently on. I go in here, and then I'm just going to bring my opacity up, and I'm just going to paint around the edges. Darken that up a bit. Notice that my brush is mostly on the outside of this marquee tool, and yet it is not painting anywhere outside of the marquee. That is because when you have a marquee selected, the computer understands that you only want to paint within that exact dimension. So anything outside of there will not be painted. Now I'm going to add just a sliver of a lighter color in here and just a couple of spots with a smaller brush to finish off my bacon, as if to add a little bit of grease to this bacon, and I'm going to smudge that in to blend it. Okay, and now I'm going to remove my marquee tool again, and you'll notice that my bacon has a bit more of a solid shape. Now, if I don't like some of these edges, I can come in here with the eraser tool, and I can come in and erase little bits and pieces of my bacon as I want to. I can make this brush softer or harder by changing its hardness, and we're just going to make it just a little bit softer on these edges. And if I wanted to remove parts of it, I can come in here with the lasso tool, and I can also select the outer edges and delete to create a hard edge of this bacon. All right, so now we're going to create a secondary piece of bacon, and we're going to move that by clicking on the arrow tool and pulling it off to the side. Now I want to create more than one piece of bacon on here facing in the opposite direction. So I'm going to take these 2 slices of bacon and I'm going to create yet another set of 2 bacon. Now in this case, I'm going to go up to Edit, Free Transform, and this time I'm going to rotate my bacon. Notice how your cursor, your mouse, changes as you get closer and further away from these corner edges or from the center. When you see your arrows turn to a rotating arrow, you're going to go ahead and click and rotate. And now we have 4 strips of bacon sitting on our burger. Now I'm going to put the bacon into a folder, just like I had with the tomato. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to name that bacon, and then I'm going to click and then scroll down to the bottom, click and hold Shift, click, and pull that into my bacon. Now if I click and I just drag it directly below, you'll notice there's a single line that shows up. That's not putting it into the layer, into the folder. So we're going to lift up a little bit higher until it's completely covering that folder, and then we're going to click and release. Oops. So now I want to create a layer down here on the bottom because I realized we didn't put any condiments on here. I'm going to hide these layers, and I'm going to pull this layer down, and I'm going to name this Ketchup. Inside Ketchup, I'm going to go to my brush tool. Again, I'm going to bring my brush tool size up quite a bit. I think that should be good. And then I'm going to change the color. Oops, in this case I clicked on the bottom. I'm going to change the color to a red. And then I'm going to paint on here. Remember, my opacity is quite low right now, which I am actually quite okay with. I'm just going to put a little ketchup in here. And then notice, if we turn that layer off and on, notice the outside of the bun, there's a little bit of red that appears out there. So we're going to go in and we're going to delete that with our eraser tool. We're going to make this brush a bit bigger, and we're just going to go in and just delete that and leave our ketchup on the outside. Now I'm going to add a little bit more ketchup back in, bring this smaller, and I'm just going to paint over in here. If you've ever opened a burger after you've started eating it or after it's been made for you, your ketchup does kind of start to look like this. Okay, we're going to bring your other layers back on. And now we have your burger patty, one condiment, piece of Swiss cheese, lettuce, tomato, and bacon. We're going to create that top bun because we have our 5 items in here. So we're going to click on the top layer, which is this bacon folder, and we're going to click here so that the next new layer appears above the folder. I'm going to click Create a New Layer. We're going to title this your top bun. We're going to title this your top bun. And we're going to go in here and we're going to create a circle again. And I'm going to move that to the placement that we want it to be in. I want to show just a little bit of my bottom bun down there. And I'm going to make this a slightly different color than my bottom bun. But to get the color of my bottom bun so I can match it, I'm going to click on my foreground color picker, and I'm going to click this little sliver of bottom bun that I can see. And I'm just going to make it a little bit darker for the top. Actually, I'm going to add just a little bit more orange. And then I'm going to go to my paint bucket tool, and I'm going to fill that in. Now at this point, I'm going to remove my circle marquee tool, and I'm going to create another new layer, and I'm going to make some sesame seeds. So I'm going to take the new layer tool, I'm going to take the lasso tool, and I'm going to click and create a sesame seed. Now, this would take forever to fill in and create multiples, so I'm going to hold down Shift, and when I hold down Shift, you'll see the lasso tool adds a plus sign to it, and I'm going to click and create more sesame seeds. And I'm just going to make a cluster of sesame seeds here, because we can create multiples and then repeat these layers like we've been doing and change them around a bit, much like we did with the bacon. Okay, I think that's about enough. And now I'm going to take the paint brush tool. I'm going to change my color of my sesame seeds. They're going to be just a little off-white here. And I'm going to paint them in. Oh, I'm going to change my opacity. And I'm going to paint them in. Okay, again, when you're painting, If you paint outside of a marquee tool, it does not paint anywhere other than inside that marquee tool. I'm going to rename my layer Sesame Seeds. I'm going to create a group just for the sesame seeds to begin with. I'm going to create a group just for my sesame seeds. And I'll call that sesame seeds as well. And then I'm going to pull this inside the sesame seeds before I make a copy. Now every time I make a copy, it's going to appear inside the sesame seeds folder already. I'm going to take that, I'm going to click outside of my marquee tool to remove it, and I'm going to move my sesame seeds over. I'm also going to transform them with free transform. I'm going to rotate them and click enter. And then I'm going to take both of those by clicking and then holding down shift and clicking the last. And I'm going to create two new layers, which I'm now going to move and rotate them by going to edit, free transform, and rotate. Okay, notice how we're starting to get quite a bit more sesame seeds on here. This time I'm just going to copy one, and I'm going to move it, go to free transform again, and turn. Okay, so I'm going to keep doing that until I have a full sesame seed topped bun. Okay, I think that's about good here. And now I notice that I have one out here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this entirely, and I'm going to use the eraser tool. Oh. So I notice that I have one sitting on the outside. Rather than going through and trying to figure out which layer it is that it comes from, though we did just figure that out, I'm going to hold this down and I'm going to create a layer mask. And then in that layer mask, I'm going to use my paintbrush, make sure that my opacity is on 100, and lower down my paintbrush tool size to be a bit smaller. And using black and painting in this mask, I'm going to remove that one sesame seed. Okay, now you've created a burger. Now all we have left to do now is to create a type layer. We're going to click on the type tool, and we're going to come back into our document here. And we're going to click anywhere in the file, and we're going to write our name. And then by highlighting it, either by clicking with your type tool and selecting all of the layers, or with your cursor at the end, holding down shift and clicking back all the way, I'm going to go in and change my type. I'm going to change to something a little bit different. And then change the size. Okay. And then I can move that down into the corner. And we now have our burger. To save your burger, you're going to go to File, Save As, and you would find in your PC your H drive folder. And you would click on your H drive and save in there. In this case, I'm going to be saving to my hard drive. So I'm going to double click on my hard drive and I'm going to I'm going to create a new folder by clicking on the Create a New Folder button. And I'm going to name this Photoshop. And inside Photoshop, I'm going to name this Umberger Hamburger PSD. Be careful not to change your Photoshop document to any other of the Photoshop formats, as we want to be able to see your layers later, so we're going to keep that with Photoshop. And click Save. That's it for tutorial number 2, creating a hamburger and learning about the basic tools in Photoshop. See you in the next one.